So we got some clutches back from KWI recently, and we get a lot of questions about the setup and just kind of how everything goes back together on these and how it comes apart. So we're going to be doing kind of a basic setup for like a 240 kit, and we're just gonna, I guess, start with the tools that we have here that you're gonna need. This first tool here is made by KWI. It's got a couple different purposes. This one's been well used many times. But so the first thing that we would use this for when disassembling a clutch is putting it together like this. And you've got your primary puller that you've already used to remove the primary. This is already disassembled, but we're just kind of going over how to use this tool. So basically you screw this in here. This tool goes right on top, and this will all be put together. So this is kind of how you're going to separate the outer half from the inner half. So you'll have 6 bolts. You basically just screw those in, just kind of a little more than hand tight. And then this bolt here is actually going to press into the clutch puller that we have installed there. That's a 24mm socket. You may need a 1/2 inch impact to be able to get that separated. A lot of them are pretty tough, especially if they've been on the machine for a long time. There is a small taper at the end of the post that locks the governor cover on there. So you're gonna hit this with the impact once you got all this tightened down here, and it's basically gonna make a loud pop, and then this outer half section is going to become separate from the post and the rest of the clutch. So obviously this doesn't have anything inside of it right now. So we'll take this back out. And this is what you're going to be left with once that tool has done its job. So that's going to be the first tool. The second tool that we'll touch base on a little bit later is the G-Boost roller pin puller. Super useful. And then I have a couple of various, hammer, impact, kind of some basic hand tools. But yeah, so we'll start with this. So once you've got this separated here, we can set this aside for now. We'll talk about that in a minute. The first thing that you're going to do once you got this off of here is this spider is going to come out of here. Not all of the rollers are in it right now, so it's going to be a little bit easier. But once you have this out, your service kit or your clutch rebuild kit is going to come with these little buttons here. These ride along these sliders on the primary, and essentially they just kind of keep everything in line. It's just a wear item, but they are kind of difficult to remove. So if these wear or are worn on your clutch, you'll see this one's not too bad. There's a little chamfer around the edge, and then this actual pad that touches the slider. It's got a little groove in it. This one's not really too bad, but we're just gonna pull it out just to kind of show, I guess, how you do that. I like to use these pliers. They have a pretty good grip on them, but you're just gonna kind of grab it and twist it sideways to get it out of there. And so some of these, 3 of them, have O-rings behind them. so they kind of maintain pressure as those little pads wear. And those are going to be kind of what wears out first before the rest of the buttons. And those ones are the easiest to remove and kind of the hardest to install. So basically, we've got our new buttons here and we've got our new O-ring. So remember, there's going to be 3 of these, so it's kind of a trick to hold everything in place when you reinstall this. They just kind of sit here. You can put a little bit of RTV on that O-ring to sort of hold everything in place a little bit. What I do is I'll hold the first one together. I'll just put this one O-ring button in. Obviously after replacing the other ones or whatever needs to be replaced. But I'll put that one in first by itself, like that. And then that leaves my hands free to get the other. I'll just put those on there as well. So there's one more. And then you have another one on the back side here, which you guys can't see. But keeping that first one installed there, you can just kind of tilt it sideways, and now it's straight. We can just push down on this, and it'll be a pretty tight fit with new buttons in there. But while we have this apart, we're going to set up the clutch arms. So this would normally have a spring in here. Like I said, this just came back from machining, so all that stuff is apart right now. But so the first thing we're going to do is, depending on the tune you have and the power level, things are going to be a little bit different. So we're going kind of based off of a WS240. So we're going to start with these base arms, and this is a AO green clutch kit. So it's going to come with 4 of these, which are the base arms. They can hold up to 2 magnets in each hole. And then we're also going to get 2 of these here, which are Gen 6 arms. These can hold up to 4 magnets. So first thing we're going to do, with this being a 240, desired engine speed is going to be around like 8,000, 8,100-ish. So we're going to try and get as close to that as we can, so that we don't have to do too much fine adjustment on the car. So I'm going to start out with these base arms fully loaded. And that's going to be 2 magnets in each hole. So we got these 4 done here. And then these Gen 6s we're going to leave empty for now. The reason for that is because these have a little bit different shape to them. And when you start to add weight to these arms, they act a lot heavier than the base arms do. So a little bit goes a very long way with the Gen 6. So now that we have these all set up, we have our little, basically these are just a replacement for the factory nylon washers. We just stock these because the nylon ones break pretty easily and they're kind of hard to get. You basically have to buy the pin, which is this, the stock arm, and the little nylon washers in one package, and it's pretty expensive. So we're gonna use these, and we're just gonna slide this first arm in here. Pin's gonna go through here, just like that. So now that we've got one in here, We want everything on this clutch to be symmetrical. That keeps the clutch balanced, and it keeps all the clutch parts inside the clutch once you start the engine. So we're going to do 2 across from each other. And we're going to do 2 more across from each other. That leaves us 2 spots left for the Gen 6s. So once we got all these in here, we can go ahead and tighten up these bolts and be very careful not to strip these out, because like I mentioned earlier about that package that comes with those washers and the pin and everything, it's like 75 bucks. So we don't want to strip these out. This is a T25 head on the pin here and an 8mm lock nut. So got our T25, a little 8mm wrench, and just snug it up a little bit. Check one more time, make sure these all move nice and freely. And then another thing that I like to do when I'm putting these together is I'll actually mark next to the arm what I put in it, because you can't see how much weight is in each arm once everything's put back together. So I'm just going to put a little 4 next to all the base arms. And the Gen 6s, we'll just leave those blank and we know what's in there. So that's kind of the basis of our clutch kit. And then we're going to put this back in, and now it's time to install our primary spring. So we got the 2800 RPM engagement pink spring here, and this is our next tool that we're going to use. This is a OEM tool. You can do this a couple different ways. It's pretty easy just to find like a threaded rod from the hardware store, and essentially you need a large washer for both sides, and you'll need a nut for the top to actually compress the spring. So we'll put this on here actually first, since this has just been cut. Take a little paper towel. There we go. Just so it doesn't get scratched up. And we're going to put our spring in here. Got our little cap for the spring. Go ahead and put this washer on top. And then this, if you're going the hardware store route, this will be obviously your nut. And we're just gonna compress this down. Now once you get pretty close to the end here, this is where you're going to want to try to line everything up. There is a little lip on this cup here, so kind of just straighten it out, see if you can get the bolts to line up, or the bolt holes, and we'll go a little further. All right, there we go. So we got that. Got our screws here. These are T30s. And this section of the clutch actually had to be replaced. So those holes are not threaded from the factory. So we're just gonna send those in here. So these are the non-O-ringed buttons that I'm gonna be replacing. I just took a couple of them out just to show you guys, but we're gonna put one back in. And it's kind of tricky. You basically just wanna line it up as close as you can, and then take your hammer and gently tap it in. And you'll make sure it's even on all sides. And just be careful. You can break these, so it's definitely a press fit when those go in there, unlike the O-ringed buttons. But yeah, we'll just do that one just so that you guys can see how it's done. And then we'll put this back on. So we'll do the same thing we did before, kind of one at a time. All right. So another thing that we get asked a lot is as far as like clutch noise. So when you hear like a chatter at idle, or you know, if you start your machine up and it kind of sounds chattery, that's because, well, one of the reasons is because these buttons wear out, and this spider will actually kind of rock back and forth, and it's not really a huge deal. I haven't seen it cause like major problems, but that's what that noise is. So next thing we're gonna do We've got these two washers here. These come in the kit. And then we've got our primary bearing. This is a brand new one. But you will want to inspect this when you take your clutch apart. You can kind of see sometimes the very outer edge of this bearing will become burnt. And then you can also shake the bearing and you can hear that those needles are nice and tight in the cage still, obviously because it's new. But if you shake a worn one, you'll hear it, and it's quite a bit louder. So that first one goes down in there, bearing goes on, next one goes on, and there's your primary. So this top section here that's a tapered fit. So I kind of like to put this on first. You know, when you're putting it back on your machine, I'll just put this on first by itself, just so that way you're not fumbling around trying to hold these two pieces together, because they don't actually get pressed together until you tighten the bolt. But that's our primary. That is done. And the next thing we're going to get onto is the secondary. So this just came back from KWI as well. It's got a nice clean surface. They installed some roller bearings for us. These break, the factory ones break all the time. It's very common. You'll notice, like, this is your helix, right? OEM helix. There'll actually be a gap here, you know, because the roller's gone. And if that gets let go for too long, it'll actually wear into the helix and destroy the helix as well. So these rollers are great. We sell rollers too. There's KWI does a big roller mod, but these are the ones that we've got today, and we'll just kind of demonstrate how this G-Boost tool works here. So these are a T20. So we're just going to take that out, and then inside of here are some threads. Now basically what you do is you've got this tool, right? It's got the nut, the washer. We put a little ARP lube on there just because it gets used a lot. But basically just set this in here, and it's going to sit in between these fins, and then just screw that little stud right into the dowel. And in order to pull it out, we don't need to pull this out because it's new. But the way I like to do it is I'll take a socket and just a regular ratcheting wrench. You want to hold the socket in the reverse position. So you're going to just hold it still. And then you're going to tighten this nut. And as you do that, it's going to just pull the dowel out. And once you pull it out, if it's got stock rollers in it, or pretty much any time that you're changing rollers, it's a good idea to just put those in a drill like I did with that pin earlier, with some Scotch-Brite. Just clean them up and then test fit the roller on the pin before you reinstall everything, just to make sure that it spins nicely. We're just going to put that back on there. So now we're going to put the secondary together. We're going to put this on first. We're going to go back to our rod over here and just kind of set that down. This is going to go right on top. So we've got this piece here. This is going to go on the bottom of the outer sheave. And there's a little hole in the plastic. See if I can find it. We're going to line that up. And generally, I would say this is the most common spring that we use. It's a factory Turbo R spring. It's good for a pretty wide range of power levels. So I'm going to put this in the green side up. It doesn't really matter, but that's how I do it. And then I'm going to show you guys a couple different ways to wrap this. First of all, when I am wrapping a secondary, I don't really go off of the numbers on the holes. Don't actually all match up. But this is going to be kind of your stock setting here. This is a 3749. So this would be like a Turbo R helix. But essentially what you're going to do is put the washer on top here and you kind of press down a little bit. And get that nut threaded on. And so what I look at when I'm putting wrap on these is essentially where these posts are in relation to the roller, right? So whenever you wrap the secondary, you're going to go past a roller, and how far you're going past the roller basically dictates how much wrap is in the secondary and how much bite your secondary is going to have. It also affects engine speed quite a bit. So this is what I'm going to use to help me wrap it. And basically what you're going to do once you have this on here, you just kind of stick this in here like that, and I'll kind of put it in my arm, and then I'll actually grab the outer sheave, these fins, and twist it like that. So it makes it pretty easy. I can hold on to it because it's in the vise, and then I can just tighten this down. So that being stock, the stock position, there's hardly any wrap. If we were putting this on our 240 machine, it's going to slip the belt pretty bad. So the other thing we have as well is we got a DR3 helix. So this is obviously the factory one that your machine came with. This is optional as far as when you purchase the clutch kit, but we have one, so we're going to put it on. And I'm going to kind of start out here, let's say, right about here is kind of where I want to be for 240. So every fin, if you're looking at degrees of wrap, every one of these fins here, if you just count them and divide them by 360, you'll get, you know, the angle between each one, which is 15 degrees. So you can also count based on that. But generally for, like, let's say a stock weight machine, you know, not something that's necessarily like something that's a 4-seater or has, you know, 37s on it or huge paddles or something like that, everything's going to be a little bit different. So that's going to kind of dictate a little bit how much wrap you really want to put in it. But if you have a machine that's close to factory weight that has the WS240 tune in it, this is going to be where we're going to go. So same thing, we put the washer on top, press that down a little bit. There we go. it's kind of tricky. But, so now that we have that, we have the spring in the hole that we want. We're gonna go ahead and do the same thing. Put that bar in there, and then add your wrap. And when you do this, go a little bit past the rollers, because you don't want that post to be digging into your brand new rollers while you're installing this helix. Once you get down there's a way, pull this back out. Just go down with it. All right, so once we're to this point, there's going to be 2 arrows that you want to line up. This one here on the top. Then there's going to be one exactly the same on the bottom. And that's just going to line your sheaves up. Keeps everything balanced. So I just always line those up. We're going to take our bolts. We'll start threading these in. Started. This socket makes everything a little bit easier. Gives you a little bit of an angle. We'll just kind of snug that down. Last but not least, we're going to torque these bolts. And these are 13 millimeter or 1/2 inch. We're going to torque these to 42 foot-pounds. So the easiest way to do this is to kind of go for the opposite bolt furthest away from you. There we go. Ready to put it back on the car. So this setup is a factory Turbo R secondary spring. It's got about 90 degrees of wrap in it with a DR3 helix on it. And I would say, generally speaking, if you are above a 160 tune and at or below a 260, that amount of wrap with this helix and this spring should be adequate for you, unless it's, I guess, a exceptionally heavy or exceptionally light machine. Tire sizes can also affect this a little bit. And it's kind of something that you play, I guess, by ear. We have a general way that we kind of set everything up per package. But once you get out into the real world, you know, your driving style combined with where you're actually driving and how heavy your machine is and how much traction it has, all those things can affect the fine tuning of the clutches and everything, you know, even if it's two identical machines, two different drivers might require some different things depending on their environments. So this is just kind of a basic setup, but you would go with your fine tuning adjustments from there.